My sister invited my husband and me to the country house of her new boyfriend. It was early fall. All the trees were bright yellow and orange, their leaves glistening in the gentle sun, but it was still warm enough to sit on the veranda. The crisp air hinted at winter approaching, but the warmth persisted, giving the whole landscape a serene, almost magical quality. We arrived at the house, dropped our things off in the guest room, and went for a walk around the village lake. The lake itself was calm, reflecting the colors of the surrounding foliage, and we could hear the leaves rustle lightly with every breeze. My sister introduced us to her boyfriend, handsome Rizzo, who seemed like a pleasant and polite man. He greeted us with a warm smile, and his confident demeanor immediately made me hope my sister wouldn't leave him. He was the kind of man who seemed reliable, kind, and frankly, perfect for her. After we were settled, I went down to the kitchen to make some chamomile tea, which helped me fall asleep more easily. The kettle was slowly boiling, and while I waited, I decided to peek into the living room. What I saw took me by surprise. There stood Rizzo, wearing only gym shorts and no t-shirt. His athletic body, fit and trim, held my gaze for longer than I cared to admit. The sight of his muscular chest and strong arms seemed to freeze me in place, and I stopped awkwardly in the doorway, trying to decide what to do. I felt partly guilty for looking at him, but there was something undeniably captivating about him at that moment. I took a step back, intending to leave quietly, but at that very moment a floorboard creaked beneath my foot. The sound echoed through the quiet house, and Rizzo turned to look at me, catching my gaze. A smile slowly spread across his face, and he stood up, heading toward me. I felt my face redden and my heart pounded in my chest. He handed me several welcome packets to choose from. His gesture was casual, as if he hadn't noticed my gaze. I took one, my hands trembling slightly as I stirred the sugar with a spoon, and sighed as I smelled the fragrant steam. Rizzo looked at me slyly, holding my gaze a moment longer than necessary, and asked if I'd ever done yoga. The question caught me off guard, and I shook my head, taking a sip of tea to hide my confusion. Rizzo didn't seem to notice my hesitation. He moved with a kind of confident energy, and before I knew it, he'd brought his yoga mat into the kitchen. He spread it out right in the middle of the floor and called out to me, his voice soft but with a note of challenge that piqued my interest. It sounded intriguing, different somehow, and I was curious. I hesitated for only a moment before deciding to agree. I sat down on the mat, and the cool surface beneath made me wince slightly. I looked at Rizzo and asked, "So what's next?" He smiled, moved closer, and put his arms around my back. His fingers clenched tightly, making a few movements to relax my muscles, and I couldn't help but close my eyes, feeling the tension in my shoulders begin to go away. Then he suddenly moved me into a koshi pose. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze, and he laughed softly, a hint of playfulness in his expression. "You don't want to continue?" he asked, his voice low and tantalizing. I bit my lip, my heart racing, and quietly replied, "I do." Hearing this, Rizzo became more bold. His hands moved slowly around my waist, then lower, and his touch sent shivers down my body. There was an unspoken understanding between us as we moved together, our breathing getting heavier, the morning sunlight streaming through the window and illuminating the kitchen. We continued right there in the center of the kitchen on the yoga mat, captured by the intensity of the moment. The world outside the window seemed to dissolve, leaving the two of us alone in this shared, stolen moment. When it was over, we each stood up, realizing that what had just happened could never be acknowledged again. Each of us pretended that nothing had happened and went back to our roles we were supposed to play. He went back to the living room, and I returned to my tea, now warm, the steam having long since dissipated. I took a sip and stared out the window, thoughts swirling in my head, emotions I couldn't quite understand. The rest of the day passed as if nothing had changed, but deep down I knew that something had changed between us, even if we never spoke of it again.